The next comparison would be Odegaard versus Martinelli. Obviously, you had Saka most of the time. Oh, sorry, I think you had Saka and Odegaard exactly for 12 games. You never took Martinelli in. So what was the decision? What was the thought process behind that?
Yeah, I think this is probably a little bit more interesting in terms of the thought process behind it, because whereas the Aston Villa guys, it's pretty much a coin flip. These players I do see a bit differently. So I actually had Odegaard early in the season, and talking about that flat track bully type of approach. I brought him in for game weeks 4 to 6, and he scored a free kick. I think it was against maybe Watford or Norwich. And just grabbed a few points there before reshaping my team on my wild card. But then it came down to that period where Arsenal were not blanking when most of the other teams were. So I wanted to get one of these two players with about 10 weeks of the season to go. And Martinelli is a player I really like. I definitely think he was more explosive. A much more exciting pick, but I just thought there's about 9 or 10 weeks left. I want to be doing other transfers later in the season with the doubles that are left to come, with my big captaincy differentials I might want to use to try to gain rank in the last few weeks. So I didn't want to have to make another transfer in my 5.5 midfielder slot. And so again, through the eye test, watching Arsenal, I was just saying that Odegaard is having this really, really key role.
He was everywhere.
He is an excellent, real life player.
Yeah.
And I just thought, there's no way he's going to get dropped. He's, fit enough to pretty much play every minute. Whereas Martinelli, I just thought he's looking good at the moment, but Smith Rowe is there, even Pepe is there, or they could change system and might not use a winger on that side or something like that. He was just a little bit more of a minutes risk over the longer term. And so I went with the more solid option. I don't think points wise it necessarily worked out to be a big game, but that was the thought process behind it anyway, just to set.
Interesting you mentioned the minutes part there. So obviously Odegaard, who is now touted to be probably the next Arsenal captain, he obviously was kind of supposed to play more minutes than Martinelli, because Martinelli played as a striker, he played as a left winger. Then when Nketiah came into the picture, he was totally, I don't know what was the reason behind he was benched. So do you really pick and choose your battles between, if you were to pick a player between two, X minutes would be obviously a big factor versus the explosiveness of the other one?
I think you need a balance. I think your team, you need to have a really solid foundation of players who you're not going to have to be spending transfers on, because transfers are too precious. But I do think there is space around the edges of your team for some of those shorter term, more explosive picks. If there's just a fixture that looks really good, or a double game week, or a captaincy opportunity or something like that. So it's something that I'm still thinking about, what is the right balance, and it just depends on the situation at the time. But yeah, reviewing past seasons and things that I've done, and things that successful managers have done, I think having those safe picks who, maybe they're not in the top 10 for projected points this week, maybe they're 15th, but a month later, they're still going to be there at 15th, whereas maybe the hot property has dropped way down and isn't somewhere anymore. So, when transfers are limited and so precious, those are the players that you need a solid base of, I think, in your squad.
The next example we're going to look at is the City defense. We always thought that it's the midfielders who are suffering the pep relay, but it's the defense as well at times. So you started with Diaz. Obviously, you had Cancelo, and I think you had him for, like most of us, for 29 game weeks. So you had Diaz for 16 games, and then then he got injured. But you never started with Laporte. You got Laporte in right at the end. So what was the thought process behind this?
Yeah, well, I've been watching the City defense very closely for a few seasons, and this is, partly down to playing that draft game with my other mates, and it's interesting to think about the ways that helps with FPL, because you really do need to pay attention to a larger pool of players and see if there's somebody who you can, who's maybe about to get some game time for City. So looking back to that previous season, these two started out as the first choice, and then Laporte had a poor game against Spurs about halfway through, and then it was Diaz and Stones for the rest of the season before the one that we've just had. And so then at the start of this season, in my mind, it was, I think Diaz is probably the first choice, and then out of the other two, Stones is maybe just ahead, but Stones, had a long and hard Euros tournament, and so I thought maybe he will, be eased in a little bit. So I actually didn't have either of these guys until I played my game week 7 wild card, and at that time I just thought DS is the only one, or he's the one I'm most confident who's going to play every minute going forward. Whereas I think Laporte had missed 2 of the first 6 games for Stones, so it just wasn't as clear the picture for that other position. So it simply goes back to that other point about the X-Mins, and DS was the most secure at that time, even though I think he cost a little bit more.
Yeah, and I think in the end, there was not too much of a difference between them in terms of the goal-scoring abilities. Yes, Laporte, I think, scored a goal or 2 more. But the price difference, I think, in the end, has fell quite a bit, and Laporte rose as well. So I think in the end, they finished at the same one. We don't see too much of changes happening in City defense in the next season as well. It's at the attacking front where we'll see a huge, big asset coming in terms of Haaland. Do you think Cancelo, and these are the 3 assets where typically if somebody was to start with 2 right in the beginning of the season, more or less they could kind of hold on to that for most part of the season?
Yeah, I think anybody who follows FPL knows that Cancelo is on another level to all of these guys with his attacking output. But then, I pretty much think next season it will be similar, where it will be out of these 2 and Stones to fight for 2 spots as long as they're all fit. I think Laporte probably, he almost went back to being the rock, like the first choice rock for Pep this season again. So you just have to watch closely.
All right, the last comparison we're going to do is between the Chelsea wingers, and this is somewhere there was a huge variance involved owning either of these 2. So you obviously had had Alonso for 8 games and James for 4. Were you lucky as far as James' ownership is concerned? Did you hold on to him? Were you the owner in the beginning?
No, I had bad luck, very bad luck with James. So this was probably the toughest part of my season in terms of the decision making, because on my game week 7, I played my first wild card, and I brought in Diaz, who we just talked about, and why I wanted him, and also Rudiger, along with Alexander-Arnold and Cancelo. So 4 big defenders, and pretty much, from the next week after that onwards, Chilwell and James started absolutely killing me week in, week out with all the points that they were scoring. And so I was really torn between, do I stick it out with Rudiger and Diaz as these more safe, long-term, steady minutes, reliable picks at centre-back, or do I sort of swallow my pride and make the switch to, Chilwell or James? And then I think Chilwell got injured after a few games, and so then it looked like Alonso would have that position back all to himself. And at that moment, I made the move from Rudiger to Alonso, thinking that the minutes should be reliable, but the upside is much higher, and so that's why Alonso ended up being the one that featured in my team more. But certainly not because I didn't think James was a good pick. I think he's one of the best defenders in the Premier League, and I was watching him closely at the end of the season. I just couldn't be more impressed with the way that he's playing in real life. And depending on if he looks like he's starting in that right wing back position again next season, then he'll be one of the first players that I'm looking at. So it's just a funny thing where sometimes throughout the season, the circumstances might lock you out of getting a certain player. And I think that happened with Son for a lot of people, where he's just had a slightly awkward price with the other options that were there, and that's something that helped me get a big edge in James. But James was kind of like the other side of that for me, where I wanted him, but I just couldn't get there, and yeah, he killed me.
Yeah, absolutely. I was never on the right side of both of them. So yeah, and then Chelsea defense kind of went leaky as well in the second half of the season, and the whole the new ownership, the whole saga was not really helping them. Though I really admit that I think Tuchel really handled it well. I don't think they could have been any better manager who could have handled the whole situation and keep the team going as well. One question about on the captaincy front: are you against the thought of captaining a defender?
I wouldn't get caught up too much in what position a player necessarily plays. It would really be just looking at the likelihood of playing maybe both games in a double game week or something like that, compared to the other options in midfield or further ahead, and their role in the team. Because we talked a bit about how the tactics of football have evolved in recent seasons, and some of these defenders are just as much of a goal threat as other players in their team. So no, I'm not against the idea necessarily, but I think most of the time this season, Salah or Son, were probably better options.
You spoke about Salah, and in one of the tweets, so you kind of wrote 2 tweets after your season got over, where you have beautifully, very nicely compiled your thought process and how you went about the season in 3 different phases. And you mentioned something about the reason why you did not pick Salah after the AFCON. And you mentioned very, very subtly about somebody who is fit to play and somebody who's in peak condition.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah. So you did not hold Salah after AFCON, and you thought he's not in peak condition. And you also mentioned that this is also first-hand information that you have seen while you were involved with the A-League. So can you just throw some light on that as well?
Yeah, sure. So if anybody hasn't been looking at any of my other things, I was a professional performance analyst at an A-League club here in Australia for a few years. So living the dream, and sort of seeing how professional football works behind the scenes, and doing all of this type of stuff for a living was fantastic. But through that, you can kind of see where a player, particularly when a player comes back from injury or something like that, they can get cleared to return to game time, but they're far from 100% sharpness and explosiveness and that kind of thing. And that takes, the only way to get a player up to that level is through playing matches, despite all the training that they can do and that kind of stuff. And then it works the other way as well, I think, with fatigue, where some of these players, in the Premier League are playing 50, 60 games in a season. And we know the ones that the coaches like to rely on all the time and absolutely flog them. And even if they're tired, they're probably still better than the next option, so they're going to keep getting selected. But I just think that's another situation where, okay, yeah, they're going to play, but are they going to be at their absolute best? And so with Salah, I had a theory early in the season that he would be a great option based on him getting a rest during the off season, whereas other players had the Euros, and after the couple of years of the schedule with COVID and everything like that, a lot of players had just really tapped out, I think. So that was a big advantage to him, and I think could be part of the reason why he started the season so well. But then, watching closely his minutes in AFCON and seeing that he was playing 120 minutes game after game.
Every knockout he was playing 120 minutes, and there was goalless draws till the penalty shootouts.
It's not like his role in that team as well. It's not like he could just kind of walk around and take it easy. He's relied on to be the one to make the difference for his country. So I'm sure he would have been putting everything into it. And so I did bring him back when Liverpool had those couple of double game weeks, because I just thought, even if he's a bit tired, he's still Salah. But for that last part of the season, when I knew that I wanted to take some gambles to hopefully go for number one, and knowing that, again, what I said before about updating that story in your mind about certain players and certain teams, like we did with Leicester. I updated the story in my mind about Salah, that he was just a must-own perma-cap kind of option to somebody who is still very, very good and still maybe even worth his price, but not that much head and shoulders above those other good premiums who were around him. So whereas maybe the average player or across the rest of the pack was still remembering all of those points hauls that he got for them. So that's trying to just think about the psychology of that, and I just thought I'm probably getting decent odds by betting against him based on where the rest of the crowd is at. But if he'd gone on and scored a bunch of hat tricks and punished me, I wouldn't have been surprised at all, because it's not like he suddenly wasn't a good player or Liverpool weren't a good team. It was just, you're just looking for those little marginal things, and that was a hunch that paid off this time.
That's a fascinating description. But had this decision not played out the way it has, would you have regretted falling back on your professional knowledge about the game?
Yeah, well, I mean, being involved in the game, the first thing I want to say is it's not that I have some magical insights that that passionate FPL players don't have. There's a lot of people in the community who have very good tactical observations and
Yes,
who
absolutely
are very good at breaking down different things happening with players and teams. And one of the, like everybody else, I'm there waiting for the press conferences to hear what the managers have to say and using that type of information. So it's not like some big secret set of tools that I have. That it's just that every now and again, it's just interpreting different situations or what a coach might be thinking, or the way new players might get bedded into a team, or whatever it might be. Maybe just have that little bit of familiarity with some situation that I saw myself. But yeah, as I said, it wouldn't have surprised me if this one didn't go my way, and I still wouldn't have regretted the decision though, because I think I made that decision for a reason, to try to create a bit of chaos in my rank, either high or low, at the end of the season, because I wanted to have a shot. I was close enough to maybe win it and wanted to give myself a chance, and that needed risks. But if they hadn't have come off, I would have still felt that I made the right call in that situation.
Yeah, that's the key, right? If you do not, if somebody is not successful in the decision that they've taken, there's no point being hard on yourself. It's like you said in the beginning, there are all the tools to help you out. But at the end of the day, those tools need to be used to really kind of support and assist your initial decision. And if it happens, it happens. There's no point blaming the models after that if the things haven't gone really well. And then the day, it's how easy you make your life, while playing this game. It can be stressful if you want it to be stressful. Yeah, it can be, as you rightly are depicting. You can take it easy and still do your own research, put a lot of hours, and still just trust your gut. You are a Leeds fan, and I don't know anybody in the community or all my friends who follow football who wanted Leeds to get relegated. So it's a team, of players. The kind of injuries they have gone through this season is just abysmal. They lost. So first of all, how did your Leeds love story start?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people my age in Australia who are Leeds fans, because growing up, you had Harry Kewell and Mark Viduka,
of course,
playing for Leeds in the Premier League, as well as some other. They had a few more Aussies on top of that as well. And yeah, one of the great things about that time that I spent working in football was that I grew up idolizing Harry Kewell and putting him in my fantasy Premier League team. And then he was one of the players who I was lucky enough to work with here in Melbourne in the A-League. So that was very cool. Yeah, I wouldn't try to claim that I'm the most passionate Leeds fan nowadays, but I do definitely still have a soft spot for them, and was very happy to see them get back, and did watch most of their games in their first season back, and just loved what Bielsa was doing with the team. And for people, a lot of people, I think, in FPL like to really think about football and try to think about the strategy of trying to do something where your team adds up to more than the sum of its parts. And that was the case with Bielsa's team. Like, the performances he was getting out of that squad last season, going and winning at Man City and things like that, they were just fantastic moments. And as you said, it was a shame this season with some of the injuries that they had. They really just don't have the squad or the depth to cope with losing Phillips and Bamford and others for long periods. But even though I was mostly focused on my own attempt to finish first at the very end of the season there, I was obviously closely watching what happened with Leeds as well, and was very happy to see them stay up and have another go.
All right, let's talk about FPL in Australia. You have been, like we discussed, it's the 16 years you've done in the community in the FPL while playing FPL. How has the community built up in the last, let's say, 8 to 10 seasons where things have really caught up? I see there are a few fantastic YouTube creators based out of Australia as well. What's the community like there?
Yeah, it's I think it's growing. I think Australia is probably one of those countries that's always punched a bit above its weight in FPL. Although I think you've done some work around looking at the ranks and the different countries. And so maybe you know more about that than me. So I'd be interested to hear. But the Premier League is absolutely huge here. So I think it's another one of those countries where it's probably almost more popular than even our domestic league in terms of people following it closely and that kind of thing. So I've had a lot of contact since coming first in Australia and doing so well from old mates or colleagues and things like that who see that as a big achievement and who pay attention to these things. But I have to admit that in terms of like engaging with the community, I've really just on Twitter just sort of followed a small number of accounts that kind of give the key information about the fixtures or injuries or manager quotes and things like that. So I'm actually looking forward to getting a bit more involved in the community of players down here and content creators since I came first in Australia this year, and get to know some more people and maybe get to some meetups and that kind of stuff. So looking forward to actually exploring it a bit more.
And I think Australia was around, obviously these are not exact numbers, they were around the bracket of 300,000 to 400,000 managers, which shows that it's growing. And I would love to, and as in, I love Australia for the country because they love sports in general. Brett, we have been here for an hour now, and I will leave this with the last question. You have played, we discussed the last 4-5 seasons, how topsy-turvy it has been for you. If you were to give 3 tips for new managers who are coming in, or managers who have been playing it as long as you, or people who have been playing it for the last 7-8 years, just 3 general tips, what would it be?
Yeah, I gave this question a bit of thought when you sent it through, and I don't like just saying the same old things that you hear from others. So it's the start of off season now, and everybody's got a little bit of time. So what I would suggest to people, and what's really helped me anyway, is I'd say go away and read a book called Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. It's not about football at all, but it's about behavioral psychology and behavioral economics. And so for understanding all of your different cognitive biases and improving your decision making in general, I think that's a fantastic place to start. And I would add to that, then go and read Moneyball as well if you haven't. The movie's great. I love the movie as well, but the book is also fantastic. So just to kind of upgrade your decision making in general, that's something I would say. The next one would be to go away and do some work in understanding models and points prediction models. So, and by that I mean, really get it, listen to podcasts and read articles from the people who have put them together to understand like what is in them and what are the decisions that they are having to make
Right.
to come up with those projections, because I think by understanding that yourself, it will allow you to use them a lot better and understand, you know, there's a lot there that's just like objective information that you'd be a bit of a fool to get against. But around the edges of the models, the modelers themselves are having to make subjective decisions and guesses as to how much of this information to weigh against this type. And so once you understand that, they're a little bit less. Or around this time last year, I think in the off season, I actually went and looked on Sertalp's YouTube channel, who creates the FPL optimized site that we were just looking at, and he gives you a tutorial on how to make your own optimization
exactly.
model on Excel and on Python. And I did the Excel one, and I didn't use it at all throughout the season, but just going through that over on a weekend helped me get a feel for, how far those tools have gone,
Right.
and what, where it's still, where they still have ground to make up in future and things like that. So anyway, that helped me interpret those. And then, the last thing I'd just say is play your own game, understand what your own strengths and weaknesses are. If it's more eye test, more data, more long-term steady play, or higher risks, or whatever. I think there are a lot of different ways to play this game successfully still.
I would definitely buy this book. I do read a lot of psychology stuff myself as well. So this is something which is I'm going to go to Amazon and book right away.
Very
Brett,
good. Well,
you've been very kind in accepting my invite. I sent it to you, and you very gracefully mentioned that you already have something lined up before that, and you still, accepted it and came to the show. Absolute pleasure, and I would look forward to interacting with you during the season as well, in the new season, pre-season, build up to the new season, and the fixtures are out. Hope to speak to you soon on Twitter, and maybe one day again, just before the season starts. We will have a chat again about Leeds fixtures.
I would love that. Yeah, thanks so much for inviting me on. I really enjoy talking about this game, so it's been a pleasure.